It's time to take a look at essay questions, and these can be fairly difficult to write because there are a lot of things to keep in mind. First of all, we have to consider the developmental level of our students. That's going to be a big one as we're writing essay questions. If we have a great big wide open abstract hypothetical question and we're working with 7th graders, it probably won't function very well and the students will get frustrated and confused. But at the same time, we want to give them an appropriate level of challenge. So it's really important that we kind of think about Piaget and Vygotsky as we're crafting essay questions. The next thing to consider is that essay questions should not be places where things are listed and defined, those really low-level objectives. That's a waste of time and space. In other words, it's not a practical use of the essay. Essay should be an opportunity for your students to explore the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, to apply and to analyze. So they can come up with examples of things, or they can analyze a scenario and suggest a solution. They can draw a picture, they can solve a difficult problem. Really think outside the box as far as essay is concerned. It doesn't have to mean they're writing a 5-paragraph, do this type of essay. It can be different and more than that. But I'll go ahead and show you just some of the guidelines here. So I've got it labeled essay. We're starting with instructions, always having good instructions to help soothe our students. So again, we start with a verb, right? So we're going to say write, and then here you can say how long you want it to be or kind of what you're looking for. So you could just say something like write a thorough response. Or you could say write a 250-word response if you really want your students counting words. I don't. You could say write a half-page response. So whatever it is you're looking for here. When I'm working with my college students, I always say, kind of write a thorough response to the question below. And if you've trained your junior high and high school students to know what you mean by thorough, then that should work as well. So I'm going to put that here, write a thorough response to each of the questions below. And then you can say in the space provided. Also here, of course, I could say to questions 1 and 2 below, like that, so they know exactly which questions I'm referring to. You could say in the space provided, or you could say on a separate piece of paper, or you could say in your essay booklet, whatever you want to use. So I'm going to say in your essay booklet. Then with essays, you generally want to say the point value, how much each response is worth. So I can say each response is worth up to 10 points. And you want to tell them how long it'll take them to answer it. And should take approximately, now how do you know how long it'll take? Well, the general rule is you should write an answer to the question yourself. And then multiply that by 2 or 3. So you being the expert and having written the question, you'll obviously be able to go a lot faster than your students who are trying to demonstrate knowledge of the subject. So I generally multiply it by 3. So if it took me 5 minutes to complete, then it should take them 15 minutes. All right. Now, we come down to the questions. Now this bottom one you guys have seen before if you're in my educational psychology class. And this is the type of essay question that I generally go for. What I've done here is I've used verbs from Bloom's taxonomy. Identify a moral issue. Describe. Choose a stage and explain what you would have them do. And then I say things like use specific examples, blah, blah, blah. So basically what I've done is taken a really big question and broken it into pieces. And I could even go so far as to put space in between these and then allow students to answer these as shorter essay questions, which is kind of preferable actually for junior high and high school students. So you may consider doing something like this where you take a really beefy essay question and break it up into smaller pieces to have the students respond to. Now I want us to take a look at this one up here as well. This is one I pulled off of the internet, and I want us to go through and analyze it and see if we can fix it. So a lot of what we'll be doing as we create any type of test question is actually going into test item banks, like on UEN, they have a test item bank there called UTIPS, or online and looking at what other people have done before, or we'll even be given tests that are kind of correlated with the Common Core that we're supposed to use. And it's going to benefit us to know how to evaluate and craft really good exam questions so that we can fix things that we find in test banks and online. So I found this question right here. I'm going to go ahead and delete this bottom one so that we don't have it in our way, so we can kind of focus. This question I found online, and it's for kids who are trying to get their GED. And I'm going to read it to you really quick. It says, the term, quote, human rights, unquote, is used frequently in daily conversation, but much less frequently defined. What rights do you think should belong to every human being? Okay, I see some major problems with this question. First of all, it's completely opinion-based. So from a teaching perspective, if I were to use this in my classroom to see if my students understand the concepts that we used in class, this being so openly opinion-based without requesting any support is going to be a problem. Because literally a student could say, I think everyone should have the right to party. Done. That answers the question that has been provided. So this is an issue to me when we say, what do you think? And don't ask for any support. Now, the GED people have obviously given them some other guidelines. They're looking for a 5-paragraph essay format and whatever. And they're really just actually looking at the writing quality, not necessarily the correctness or accuracy of the content. But in our classes, we're trying to evaluate whether our students have actually learned what we're teaching them. And so we're going to need to be more specific in our instructions. So if I were actually teaching a unit on human rights and I wanted to ask a question like this, which I've seen many of you working on over the course of your assessment inventories, I need to provide some additional parameters to make sure that my students really understand what we've been learning throughout the unit. So here are some suggestions that I might make to you. First, well, let me make a little list. Suggestions. Give them a number. Okay, that helps to calm the students who stress out about really broad questions like this, because it says, what rights do you think should belong to every human being? And then they feel they have to write a treatise, or they have to write the Bill of Rights, or they have to write, they have to write this huge thing that encompasses every right that every person should have. Questions that are open and broad like this actually add to students' anxiety because they don't know how much to put in there, and they're never sure whether what they've written is enough. So I might say something like, identify 3 rights that you think should belong to every human being. Okay, now I'm also going to say B, ask for evidence or support. Okay, so they should have to back up their statements with evidence or support. Okay, so identify 3 rights that you think every human should have. Support your rights, or whatever. You're going to have to reword this, obviously, with arguments from our class discussions, the text, or other resources. You can decide how you want this phrased, okay? And then we want to push them up. If we wanted to, we could push them up even a little higher. So go for higher level objectives. We could have them do something like compare and contrast your rights with those guaranteed in the Bill of Rights. And you could say name 2 similarities and 2 differences. So be specific in your essay questions, divide it up, use verbs, and try to push them higher. Keep in mind your students' development.